Hi, good evening. Ron Mata here as usual. Not really usual. The last couple of shows I was not
unusual.
I was unusual, but I am unusual to begin with. Anyway, this is Activate Worcester. Glad to have you on board with us again. And we've got a heck of a show tonight. It seems that I always say that, but today it's particularly relevant, as you'll see in a moment. The only thing of it is I have to tell you that I'm surrounded by lots of gray-haired people, and I'm not talking about Mr. Ellison. Since I last spoke to you, the gentleman to my right had yet another birthday, and frighteningly enough, the man who's off camera, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, Chris Pinto, had yet, I think it was his 58th birthday, if I'm correct. But happy, no, we're not lying, Chris. Happy birthday, Chris. We'll sing you later. It's a beautiful thing. But at any rate, good seeing you again. You're off to China shortly, I guess.
Yep, I've got a business trip. I'll be leaving Saturday morning.
Good.
So we're, as you point out, we're lucky enough to have an expert with us tonight that can give us some information on some timely news-type stories that are we're hearing an awful lot about today. A lot of things going on in the Mideast. I understand that we're time shifted a little bit compared to what folks may see this show, but we have Jack Ellison with us. He's from Framingham, and he is the leader of the Act for America chapter in Framingham. And he's been studying the Mideast and Islam in general ever since the hostage crisis in 1979. So he's certainly over 30 years of interest in the topic, and I think he's got some pretty interesting information to share with us. So I guess we'll let Jack
Without further ado, take it away, Jack.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for having me. What I wanted to talk about tonight really is what is going on in America, in the West in general, but particularly in America with regard to the Muslim Brotherhood. If we go back to 9/11, everybody remembers where they were, what was happening, and that happened. I think probably one person out of 1,000 had a clue as to what that was about. Now, a lot more people have come to understand that there is an issue with Islam, and we're told it's a religion of peace. We're told it's this, it's that. We're told that a group of crazies, insurgents, terrorists, hijacked a great religion and took it away and knocked down the buildings. This is not really the way this is not really the way it is in their world. So I would like to discuss what we find is an identical agenda from those forces that are Islamic, in particular the Muslim Brotherhood. I'd like to focus on the sameness of goal, the sameness of agenda between what is called violent jihad, like we had 9/11, Fort Hood, for example, versus what we call stealth or civilization jihad. So my group, the organization I belong to, that I work with, is Act for America. Act for America was founded by Brigitte Gabriel. She's a Lebanese immigrant who went through an Islamic war in her home country of Lebanon in the 70s and 80s, and came out of it knowing what their agenda and what they were like, but not really believing that it could happen again anywhere. She moved to America, 9/11 happened, and then she realized, as she'll tell you, that, okay, it's here now too. So we're told that bin Laden was a radical extremist, and we're focused on radical agenda as being the name we give to the bad form of Islam. I'd like to clarify what their ideology really is about and how they have different channels happening at the same time right now, and by that I mean peaceful stealth civilization jihad, as opposed to things that are overtly violent and like 9/11. Let me say at the outset that Sharia law which is what their goal is utterly 100% incompatible with anything having to do with our Constitution. Islam has been doing what it does, and has been based on the same ideologies for 1,400 years now. Mm-hmm. And if you look at how the Ottoman Empire had expanded, how huge it had become, south half of Europe and the northern entirety of Africa and an awful lot of Asia, you don't get the picture that it did all that because their homeland was being invaded or because Israel had been built in 1948. So, let me read a couple of points here. The statement of the Muslim Brotherhood, and let's define who the Muslim Brotherhood is. This is, Muslim Brotherhood was established in 1928 by an Egyptian named Hassan al-Banna, and what he wanted to do was bring back the global caliphate that they had been at war.
Define caliphate.
Caliphate means that there is a universal ummah or people, nation of Islam that has nothing to do with national boundaries or states or cities or nations, and is overseen by a leader. In this case, the leader would be called the caliph. You can say that Islam will tell you it's a religion of peace, but what they mean by peace in their pursuit of it means that there will be peace when the whole world has become one Islamic nation. So that's the caliphate. It doesn't respect national boundaries, borders. It doesn't permit anything secular. And they believe that eventually they will get there. So the pursuit that they engaged in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, which brought about the Crusades, really. Crusades were a response to 300 plus years of slaughter and invasion by Islam. That caliphate is still what their book says they have to pursue. And the reason it's not going to change is because their book is not going to change. Their Quran is not going to change. It's the immutable word of Allah. So that's caliphate. And I'm not an expert on Islam, don't get me wrong, but at least I am able to articulate what it's trying to do here in this country and in the West, and what it's trying to undo. Our Constitution, for example, is what Islam wants to replace with its own law, and that is called Sharia law.
One of the things I find fascinating is that you said the Muslim Brotherhood has been operational now for over 80 years, since 1928.
Yep.
And until we've had this marvelous Arab Spring, and that's a very, very recent entry into the international scene.
Right.
Personally, I had never heard of the Muslim Brotherhood.
Right.
But they've been out there doing their thing.
Well, they were imprisoned in a lot of these countries because the Arab Spring that's going on right now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the Arab Spring that's going on right now from Obama is all about erasing those nation states. So for the duration of the 75 or 80 plus years, the Muslim Brotherhood did exist, but those leaders that had their countries knew that if they let those people out of prison, they would try to topple their regimes, which is why they were so little known for so many decades. And let's say what the word Islam means. Let's define what that means.
Please.
From the source, okay. A devout Muslim will tell you that it actually, the word Islam means total submission to the will of Allah. That's all it means. That's what it means. In Islam, you have one human freedom. And that is the freedom to accept this or not. That's your one human freedom. So.
And those who don't are considered infidels.
Those who don't are either slackers, or they're outright infidels, or if they're the Jewish religion, they're most hated. It's not that. I mean, if you're approached by a Muslim, or you get the call to come to join, to convert, or revert as I would call it. If you're a Jew or a Christian, you can avoid, you can keep your head if you go along with submitting and saying, yeah, I am now defeated and you rule and I'm a second-class citizen. So that's what they call dhimmi, status of dhimmi.
Yeah.
But so infidels, yeah, we're all infidels who do not believe that Allah is the one God and Muhammad is his messenger and is the prophet. So, yes. So we're saying that what the word Islam means, total submission to the will of Allah. Let's look at the word jihad. In its source, this is coming from a book called The Reliance of the Traveler, which is the source of truth for articulating what the Quran is saying. And according to The Reliance of the Traveler, the word jihad means to war against non-Muslims, and it's etymologically derived, and I'm quoting, it's etymologically derived from the word mujahada, signifying warfare to establish the religion. But what you hear these days in a lot of the interfaith dialogue engagements, because we have lots and lots of mosques spreading up around the country, basically that are generally run by Saudi Arabia eventually. But what you hear is to the contrary, that, well, it's a religion of peace, and that jihad means mulling over how to perfect yourself. That it's an intensive self-examination process. No, according to the source, that's defining what it means. Jihad means to war against non-Muslims, and it is related to a word signifying warfare to establish the religion. So it's an either-or picture of the world for Islam. You either are Muslim or you're not. And if you're not, you have to be managed, taken over. You know, this is conquest.
Or exterminated.
Or exterminated, right, depending. So those are the two terms that we hear an awful lot about. And we hear people saying, no, Islam is nice and has to do with perfecting the self and so forth. No, it has to do with simply total submission to the will of Allah.
Well, this seeming conflict in definitions, I've heard a term from time to time, I think it's pronounced taqiyya.
Taqiyya, yeah. Which
essentially says that the unvarnished truth needs not be told to accomplish the objectives. Is
right, that? Right. Yeah, taqiyya translates as deception or dissembling, basically lying. The experts on the practice of taqiyya will tell you, for example, Raymond Ibrahim will tell you that taqiyya is optional when the goal is optional, but where it has to do with advancing the cause of Allah, it's mandatory. Now, take
so
that.
The end justifies the means.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're saying that, but think about what it means that it's mandatory, that you answer in the affirmative or the negative when what you say will advance or impede the cause of Islam. Think about what that means. If you ask a person of the Muslim faith, here's a question, such and such, is Islam this? How they answer you can determine whether the cause of Islam is helped or not. So can you count on getting a legitimate answer when you ask the question, any question about Islam itself? What are they going to say? So I had a couple of points also I wanted to go into on, as we talked about the Muslim Brotherhood, how it was founded, what its charter is. So it was founded, as I said, in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna in Egypt. He wanted to bring back the Ottoman Empire because it had been crushed during World War I, and Turkey had gone secular. So anyway, he established this secret society, and it has become known as the Muslim Brotherhood. And here's a quote from him. and he is the founder of Muslim Brotherhood. It is the nature of Islam to dominate, not to be dominated, to impose its law on all nations, and to extend its power to the entire planet. It's a quote from the founder of Muslim Brotherhood. Their charter, which you will see when you see their banner, the words associated with their banner will say, Allah is our objective, the Prophet is our leader, Quran is our law, jihad is our way. We just said what jihad is. Mm-hmm. And dying in the cause of Allah is our highest hope, highest aspiration. So back to what we are describing having, anything that we call jihad now, and we opened up with talking about 9/11, and we're saying that's violent jihad, or we're saying, or someone is saying, to be politically correct, good religion was hijacked. Here, I have here, from a captured document, which was the Al-Qaeda training manual that our government now has, and in the Al-Qaeda training manual, they state their mission. And to quote them verbatim, the main mission for which the military organization Al-Qaeda is responsible is the overthrow of the godless regimes and their replacement with an Islamic regime. So, looking at the word expansionist, to me that's a synonym for Islam and for jihad. So, if we look at the paperwork that was written to describe the charter for the Muslim Brotherhood in America, written by a fellow named Muhammad Akram. He was a senior Hamas leader in the U.S. and he was a member of the board of directors for the Muslim Brotherhood in North America. So the document that he wrote states the following. Their mission statement is that the Ikhwan, or the Muslim Brotherhood, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, meaning us, and the hands of the believers, so that Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. And that vectors right into why I think an installment number 2 for us to follow up with next time around would cover the OIC and their attempt to get it criminalized, any kind of criticism of Islam to be criminalized. They're working through the UN to try to get that done. They're about 12 years into their plan right now, and I think they have 2 years left to go. So that's on their agenda. What else can we say about, what questions do you have about anything we've seen so far?
One of the questions that I have, just kind of responding to what you're saying, the feeling is that, well, it's pretty treacherous people you're dealing with. They've gone through this with the wars, 1,000 years ago, with the Crusades. They're not stopping.
Right.
World dominance is the objective. But again, it's on the other side of the Atlantic. That's the perception.
Yeah.
So why should Americans really be all that concerned? There aren't that many Muslims in this country right now. So what do we have to fear other than what's obviously going down in Israel as part of their whole program?
Right.
But from your perspective, why should people who are watching this show have more than just a casual interest in this whole Islam issue?
Right. Good question. And you'd think that if it was on the proportional scale of things, it couldn't matter much. But the reality is that the Muslim Brotherhood has been in this country for 5+ decades, and they work in this modality of quietly converting and gaining positions of influence and power. I wouldn't be naming names right now tonight, but we can identify a lot of people that are helping the cause of Sharia, or Islamic law, in our government right now. So and we could identify those as being in the White House, State Department, FBI, DOD, etc.
Well,
That's a
and
whole other topic.
do we get a look ahead if we go look at certain countries in Europe and the Muslim Brotherhood enclaves in, say, France or the Netherlands or
Great Britain.
Great Britain?
Yeah, they're taking it pretty bad, aren't they? I mean, the empirical knowledge on this from the history of just the last 30 years is that once a population density of Muslims, and let me say it, let me guaranteedly say, we're not saying all Muslims are like this whatsoever. What we're talking about, in fact, they're the first victims of those who pursue Islam from this perspective.
Well, and there's a whole group like Rudy Jasser, I think he's out
Zudi
of
Jasser, yeah.
Zudi Jasser
Yep.
out of Arizona. I think he's a doctor, and he's quite on the other side of all this.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. I know that his effort is to try to keep the religion of Islam peaceful. But when you go, and again, it's for definite, most Muslims are peaceful people. We're talking here about the 15 to 20% that we have to worry about that pursue this definition of jihad, this definition of Islam, which is total conquest. Now, out of 1.5 billion Muslims in the world,
150 million people.
Yeah, I don't know the math, but
Yeah.
it's huge. And so Brigitte Gabriel will always say that, yes, definitely there are lots of good Muslims, and they don't pursue this. They don't do anything that's what we call violent or radical jihad, even though that's a term we made up. Islam doesn't have such a term. They don't pursue that. They're not looking for that with their lives. But as she'll say, they're not part of the problem. They're not part of the solution. They're also basically irrelevant. Well, I mean, you had the same thing in Nazi Germany in the 30s. You know, when 10 or 15% of the Germans went that route. Whatever we call that route, it's the worst route one could take a civilization. So if you boil it all down, we're talking about trying to save civilization itself from this. One of the things I hadn't planned to mention, but I'll just drop it in. The President Morsi in Egypt now has named himself to be above all regulation by any other faction within his government. So he's trying to clone what the Ayatollah Khomeini did in '79 when he came into.
Yeah.
And again, on the point of what we have to worry about, in 1980 or 81, I think it was Rafsanjani said, and I know that Khomeini said this, that America is the great Satan, and they are going to destroy us. They actually have the means of doing it. They actually have the means. The opportunity hasn't happened. The occasion hasn't happened yet. For all I know, it could happen tomorrow. But they're developing. They intend to keep their promise. They intend to take us out with an EMP attack, not a nuclear dirty bomb, not a hydrogen bomb, but an EMP attack. That's what they have been practicing. This is Iran I'm talking about. So yeah, there's that to worry about. In any case, over here, we have to worry about infiltration. Is what we have to worry about here, about our Constitution being given away on the chopping block.
Let me not interrupt, but I will,
Yeah.
because there may be some people watching the show that don't know what an EMP attack is.
Right.
And depending on the scale, it would be devastating,
Right.
and literally send us back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, what do they say? Back to 1840 or something. Right.
Whatever.
Mark Twain's time.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, EMP. So EMP is a form of nuclear detonation that sends an electromagnetic pulse, basically through whatever is beneath it. If we put up a missile 150 miles over Little Rock, Arkansas, and just set that off, then we could achieve the net effect of frying all the circuitry, all the silicon circuitry for everything. We're talking cars, the electric grid, elevators, planes, whatever. So it's been known for a long time. It's not something you find talked about on the news very much, but it's certainly one of the things that Iran has spoken of quite a lot. And of course, they keep promising to annihilate Israel, exterminate Israel, take it off the map. But since the 80 or 81 timeframe, they've promised to take us out the same. So I think what we have to worry about there is a combination of these kind of realities.
So you're suggesting we should not take that lightly?
We can't afford to take it lightly. And the fact is, we're doing nothing about Iran. We're doing nothing about Iran. So I wanted to go through a couple other things, gentlemen. I'd like to read from, because I think we've established that jihad, whether it's violent or civilization, has one common goal, that being expansion of Islamic State.
Islam is the Islamization of the world.
Yes.
Bottom line.
Yes, indeed. And it really doesn't matter if you're wearing a turban or a banker suit, because we have them in all. They're everywhere. This is a reality. I have some key findings here I'd like to read, because there's an organization called Center for Security Policy I highly respect. They're great people. Huge on this information warfare space. And what they'll say for advice is that the Muslim Brotherhood is the font of Islamic Jihad, and we know that. The Brotherhood's internal documents that we've talked about make it clear that jihad is done by subversion. We need to become attuned to what's going on.
You know, Jack, I think we've been so embroiled in this great conversation that I think we've let the time get away from us.
Did it get away?
For tonight, but rest assured, we'll have you back as soon as we possibly can.
Okay.
And love to thank you for being here tonight.
Scott?
Yep.
Jack, it's been great to have you. Very, very quick as we're wrapping up, what can the viewers, I mean, you've laid an awful lot on us in the last 28 minutes. People that are watching this show, what should they be doing at this point, from your perspective?
Well, I would recommend for anyone to try to put a priority on self-education here. And there are a number of groups you can connect with, but if you want to go on the web, you can go to www.actforamerica.org.
Excellent.
You can also go to shariathethreat.org, and you can open up your investigation there. You can get connected to an Act for America chapter.
Great place to start. And obviously, based on what you've heard over the last few minutes, this is no joke. This is serious. It's going to affect everybody in this listening audience and way, way beyond. So, again, thank you for viewing, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. Thanks again.